As I mentioned, Pastor Paula is with family this weekend, and we are so happy to have Rev Amanda McCullough with us. Many of you may know her from her 12 years of ministry at St. Jude's MCC. Today, Amanda serves on several boards, including the Department of Spiritual Care at New Hanover Regional Medical Center, Girls Choir of Wilmington, and Friends School of Wilmington. So please welcome Reverend Amanda McCullough.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good, wonderful, right. Well, it's lovely to be here and to look out and see some friends and people I've met over the years, hanging out at good places. I love being here. This is just one of my favourite spaces in Wilmington. So it always feels very comfortable to be here, but especially with all of you who have been very warm in the occasions that I've been to worship with you. I must say it feels a little bit like, not Oprah's, but Paula's Super Soul Sunday whenever I come here. Is it to you? Anyway, she asked me to speak on compassion. I thought, won't I be preaching to the choir? I didn't say that to her, but just having been with you and find you to be sort of very spiritually mature people, when she asked me to speak on compassion, I was but knowing that you are creating a movement here, grounded in love and kindness, you wouldn't blame me, would you, for assuming that you had DNA in your, compassion in your DNA. But then, Don Miguel Ruiz, you remember his book, The Four Agreements? Yes, I should know better than making assumptions. So some of you nodded your head. Great little book. I think it could be retitled The Greatest Little Handbook on Compassion Ever. But we'll stick with the Four Agreements, which you'll remember were be impeccable with your word and don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Still learning that one, obviously. And always do your best. Would you believe that came out in 1997? That's yes. Anyway, we're being called to dive a little deeper. So I'm going to move forward to 2008 to a text that many of you may know. Heron Armstrong. She wrote 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life. Brilliant. So much so that she won the TED competition, and she won about $100,000, I think. But more importantly, in her acceptance speech in 2008, she called for a charter for compassion, an international charter for compassion, to be set up. And so it was the following year, with over 100 countries signing on to it. So it's a great text, a great work. And so I thought I'd use Karen Armstrong's the 12 steps, actually I think maybe 4 of them, just as a sort of a background to compassion. And so she'll say that compassion is rather like driving a car. You don't learn to drive by reading the owner's manual. You get behind the wheel and get into the traffic. And so likewise, we actually must sort of modify our behaviour and learn to think and act towards others in accordance with the Golden Rule, which we're all familiar with. In that first step, she goes through every faith tradition that there is with an example of how they are living out that 12th step. I'm going to just, that first step with the Golden Rule, I'm just going to give you the one from Judaism that she tells. It's the story of Rabbi Hillel, an older contemporary of Jesus, and it is said that a pagan approached Hillel and promised to convert to Judaism if he could recite the entire Torah while he stood on one leg. And so Hillel replied, while standing on one leg, "What is hateful to yourself, don't do to others." And then he said, that's the whole of the Torah. The rest is really commentary. And that's pretty much the first step. Third step, compassion for yourself. I think that's always one that's overlooked. But again, Armstrong tells a story about the late Rabbi Albert Friedlander, who grew up in Nazi Germany and was bewildered by the vicious anti-Semitic propaganda of the time. And one night, when he was about 8 years old, he deliberately lay awake in bed, and he decided to make a list of all of his own good qualities. And he told himself firmly that he was not what the Nazis said, that he did have talents, and he did have special qualities and gifts of heart and mind, which he enumerated to himself one by one. And finally he vowed that if he were to survive, he would use those good qualities to build a better world. What Friedlander understood, even at such a young age of 8, was that if you can't love yourself, you can't love other people either. And so the golden rule requires self-knowledge. And Armstrong says it asks us to use our own feelings as a guide to our behaviour with others. So if we treat ourselves harshly, guess what? That's likely the way that we're to treat others. She said it's useless to castigate ourselves bitterly for feeling jealous or having anger or contempt, as those feelings will often lead to self-hatred. Instead, she said, we should quietly but firmly refuse to identify with them, saying with the Buddha, this is not mine. This is not who I really am. This is not myself. It's very much like Michael Singer in his work, The Untethered Soul, which another great work that you've probably all studied it here. But you know, he'll say, and it's true, you can have all those thoughts going on in your head, the jealousy, the anger, the contempt, the judgment, and all the rest of it. And what Michael Singer will say is, get behind it. You're just observing. That's not who you are, right? Okay, so step 1 and 2 from Karen Armstrong's 12 steps. The 6th step is the action step, and she presents a 3-step formula. This is sort of, again, a no-brainer for you. It's like me thinking, what do you need to know about compassion? But she'll say, first of all, make a resolution every day to act in accordance with that golden rule in a very positive way. So you do unto others as you would want done to yourself. The second would be to resolve each day to fulfill the negative version of the golden rule. Do not do to others what you don't want happening to yourself. And then the third thing she would say is make an effort once a day to change your thought pattern. So if you're finding yourself indulging in a bout of anger or judgment or self-pity or whatever it is, try to, as Michael Singer would say, get behind that, just observe it, and channel all that negative energy into a more kindly direction. And then when you get to the end of each day, her recommendation is that you look back and you do a sort of inventory, if you will, of the day, and check out, did you do to others as you would want done to yourself? And did you change your thoughts in a kindly way? And if you did that once, then, good, well done, and do it again the next day. And maybe, you build up a pattern, and she'd say, if you can do it for a week, once a day, then start doing those kindly things twice a day. And then fast forward then to the 12th step of her book on the 12 steps to a compassionate life. The 12th step is love your enemies. And she reminds us that it was Gandhi who said, an eye for an eye makes the world blind. We can stop the vicious cycle of attack and counterattack and strike and counter-strike that holds the world in thrall today if we learn to appreciate the wisdom of restraint toward the enemy. So voices of compassion like Gandhi's must continue to ring today. He said, that's his Gandhi, mine is not an exclusive love. I cannot love Muslims and Hindus, but then hate the English. He said, for if I merely love Hindus and Muslims because I agree with their ways, and they're pleasing to me, I shall soon begin to hate them when they do something that's not pleasing to me. Gandhi said, a love that is based on the goodness of those whom you love, that please you, well, that's a mercenary affair. And then Karen Armstrong went on to give examples of Nelson Mandela and of the Dalai Lama and Martin Luther King. For example, she said of Nelson Mandela, without any feelings of recrimination, we remember how he walked out of that South African prison after 27 years. He came to power really with that desire to initiate a process of reconciliation rather than revenge. Of course, similarly, the Dalai Lama, we know another contemporary who has risen above vengefulness, refusing to condemn the Chinese authorities, although they destroyed his monasteries and his people. And again, Martin Luther King, Jr., believed the highest point in Jesus' life was the moment that he forgave his executioners. Instead of attempting to defeat evil with evil, he was able to prevail over evil with good, saying only goodness can drive out evil and only love can overcome hate. So finally, Karen Armstrong will say, in our global village, everybody is our neighbour, and it's essential to make allies of all our enemies. We need to create a world democracy in which everybody's voice is heard and everybody's aspirations are taken seriously. And it's this kind of love and concern for everybody that's going to serve our best interests better than short-sighted, self-serving policies. Which, really, speaking to you, I am preaching to the choir, but I am going to anyway give you the basis for a good foundation on compassion, the subject that I've been asked to speak to. So let's go and dive a little deeper, which brings up for me the very powerful imagery of recently of those the Thai caves, and dive a little deeper. I mean, the caves and those 13 boys who needed to dive to survive, but they couldn't. That essential dive, the expert said, was determined to be too likely to be fatal for them. So the only way out was for them to be sedated and for then 2 professional divers to carry them out. Well, I was holding that imagery and that thought while also holding on to the thoughts about me loving my enemies and having compassion, which over the years has seemed somewhat impossible for me at times. And so sedating me and having 2 professionals carry me through might have been a good option. And that is one of the reasons why I still believe in church, well, good church anyway, the kind of church where you can be hit with a spiritual 2x4 and then have fellow parishioners walk you through to the other side. On your website, I read, living on the surface works for a while until something or someone rocks your world, and when the jolt happens, you have a choice. You can either try to get past the discomfort as fast as possible, or you can pause and dive a little deeper into your own self. The dive changes everything. So I'm going to get a little bit personal with you and give you 3 examples in my own life of when my world has been turned upside down, rocked, and I have been severely jolted. The first was when my dad died from alcohol-related illnesses. Did I have compassion? No, I did not. At the time, I was quite young, I was 25, and I judged, now this is my father who I just adored, but I didn't have compassion. I thought, you know, this was all his doing, it was all his fault, and I was mad, and I was angry, and I was all those things. I was not compassionate. A second example that maybe you can relate to, I had a beautiful long-term relationship, but it became unhealthy. And when you're in pain, it is so hard to find the compassion that would help you understand your partner. I didn't dive deeper on that one. But more recently, my world's been rocked by the current administration, but I'm not going to talk about that. My world's been rocked a couple of times, actually, in the last few years, from betrayal. Not just from close friends, but from work colleagues. Hopefully some of you might be able to relate to that. It's the real test, to find compassion upon those that betray you. I can tell you, it has worked for me just to dive a little deeper. And this is how. To be compassionate, I think you've got to start to look deeply into what is blocking your heart, what is preventing you from, you know, as Karen Armstrong has taught us, to reaching out and loving that neighbour or loving that enemy. Of course it could be a risk, and Mark Nepo, who you've been studying, he talks a lot about risk, but to let go of something that you've at least subconsciously chosen to hang on to. For me, in the example of the betrayal, I've gone deeply and now I can recognise that what I want to put it down to is my ego. My ego was really hurt from the betrayal of friends and my close work colleagues. And my pride as well, but it's all sort of wrapped up. And as I know, it goeth before the fall, but nevertheless, I was holding on to that. It's hard to let go of it. There's a big risk involved, and that's what Mark Nepo says is the exquisite risk. And he's so brilliant. He says, I think the thing that's so amazing about this is it's the things that we're scared of that have often already happened. He says, it's like, I'm afraid of being hurt, I'm afraid of being rejected, or I'm afraid of what that's going to be for me, when the fact is, it's already happened. And we're still here. I'm still standing. But I'm still worried about how that is going to impact me. We run so much in our minds. When the truth is, especially emotional truth, often these things have taken place, and we're still standing. We're still here. He says, I think what I mean by the exquisite risk, and this is tied to holding nothing back, is that we often are so close to the miracle of life. And it's natural in the same way that windows can get dirty and trees get moss and metal rusts, that we get covered by our own experience. Part of staying awake and part of holding nothing back and part of the exquisite risk is to wipe and clean away the window. Yeah? So let's clean those windows and maybe we wouldn't fear those things again and again. To be constantly committed to removing as much as possible between us and life, which, yes, makes us vulnerable, but it also returns us to the unrepeatable miracle of being here completely. So put the brick down. Put the brick down, whatever is holding you, weighing upon you, or blocking your heart. In my case, that's been my ego. You know, maybe for you it may have been a resentment or a thorn or some betrayal, you know, whatever that brick is that is stopping us being here completely grounded in our spiritual life. We're going to move into the meditation in a minute, and it will be about putting those bricks down. It will be very much about, imagining what it is that we have to let go of in order to reach out to others. I'm going to close with one of my favourite Mark Nepo stories about a cyclist who works and prepares for months for this cycling race. And it's out in the country, and the day comes, and he's in the lead. And he's ahead of everybody by quite a bit, way out in the lead. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a great blue heron comes into his path, wings spread, swooping right over him, over his handlebars, and this cyclist is stunned. And he stops. And he straddles his bike, because the path of the heron has opened up something that he had never seen, but that he'd been chasing all his life. Everybody else is catching up with him, and here he is, he's stopped, he's confused, he's run into something that he didn't expect, and now, fast forward, and at the end of the story, it's years later, and every once in a while that cyclist is asked, what cost you the race? And once in a while he'll look to the south and he'll say, I didn't lose the race. I left it. Imagine having to choose between winning the race and meeting the heron. The exquisite risk was that he was opened to being changed by whatever he encountered. So actually, the goal of his training and the cycling of this race was not to win or to finish the race. It was to meet the heron, which changed his life. For us today, the goal of all our spiritual training, the goal of being here, is to meet the heron that will smooth the thorn or dissolve the brick or quieten the noise or make good the wrong, such that we can live compassionately at all times to all people, no exceptions. So no way is this something that's going to happen overnight. But I do believe that we have eyes, and we have a sensitive ability to will that heron, to be able to observe, as you were saying earlier on, the person in the park. Those encounters that we can have. If you'd like to come and sit, I know that you have these cushions at the front for meditation, or if you'd just like to stay where you are, but I'm going to lead you into some meditation, and I wonder if this is going to help with that. Again, remembering how living on the surface works for a while, until someone rocks your world. And then you have to dive a little deeper. I'm meditating today on how I can be grounded in spiritual life. How I can be open to those encounters, even this visual on your website of this man bending down. He's just encountered it looks like a woman on the floor. She, I think, looks like she's in need. In these moments, we can just recognize that there are people, that there are groups, that there are animals, that there's nature, that is a world there that is crying, maybe quietly, maybe loudly, and they need us to recognize them, just to say hello, to acknowledge them, to touch that hurt. There's so many places that need touch, attention, to survive. We're aware of them, and yet sometimes we're holding something, a brick, ego, that's getting in the way. We have a mission here at this Spiritual Soul Center, a big mission. It's a dream that we have to be present in this community, to be helping, transforming this community. It's a vision so big that we need two hands, which means it's then impossible to pick up a brick. Our hands are needed to touch. Our hands are needed. We can't pick up any bricks now. Just put them down. Reach out.
Bring the fear and the shame, the pain and the misery. Bring everything you suspect is dangerous or impure. Bring every broken vow, disappointment, and despair. But also bring the hope of hearing your true voice, of touching your true nature. Quiet of this place, in the stillness of your heart, you are safe. There is no need to hide anymore. If you listen deeply, if you wait without wanting, your true voice will speak to you.